This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good morning, everyone. The first question we're going to discuss today, the first part of the program, and we're going to have a special presentation even before we start, is if there are, let's say, soldiers in the army. You have obviously Jewish soldiers. Some of them are Shomer Torah mitzvahs, others are not. And now you have a Shomer Shabbos who's given responsibility to be on guard, to do his work, to take a position, to go in a tank on Shabbos, and he could switch positions with someone who is not a Shomer Shabbos. Is it permitted for him to, so to speak, put the Chilul Shabbos on a different Jew? Is it a violation of Lifnei Iver Lo Sitein Michshol, causing someone else to sin? Or likewise, if you're a doctor in the hospital and you're assigned the Shabbos shift, there's another secular doctor who's assigned the Thursday shift, and you want to switch. Is this considered a violation of Lifnei Iver Lo Sitein Michshol? You're basically causing someone else to sin. Or do we say you're not causing anyone to sin, because anyway, they would be allowed to work on Shabbos, they're working to save someone's life. So anyway, it's pikuach nefashos. That's one question. Another question is, if you're a patient, is there a preference, if you need medical treatment, life-saving treatment, is there a preference to go to a secular doctor who, anyway, he's going to be Machal Shabbos, or is there a preference to go to a Jewish doctor? Now, what would the preference be to go to a Jewish doctor? The preference would be that based on the idea of oines. We know there's a concept, oines rachmana patre, that if you have an extenuating circumstance, so the Torah allows you to violate the sin based on the premise that when you're forced to do something, it's not considered like you're doing it. Oines rachmana patre. It begins with the lamdas of the Beis Halevi, but once we're talking about the topic of soldiers switching posts, Rabbi Yehuda Indig mentioned that he had a personal account when he served in the army, so I'm going to give him the opportunity to tell his story, just so you see this is not theory, this is a real life situation. So, come. Here we go.
Oh, I get the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next year is Yarchei.
Okay. Masa Shahaya Kachaya. I served in the Israeli army quite a few years ago, and I was in the communication unit. At some point during my career in the army, I became a sergeant, and I was one of those who had a shift, basically managing the whole communication unit in a big base. On Shabbos, it was my turn, and as will be discussed, I guess, at some time during this year, everybody is a Yid, and I was told that Yidden are Yidden, and you do what you have to do, but I had guidance from Rabbonim and from home. The education that I got had guidance of when to do and when not to do. So, to make the long story short, one Shabbos afternoon where I was in charge of the communication center, a high-ranking officer from a Tzanchanim unit came over in his jeep and handed me a telegram that I should send it. And by then I had quite a bit of experience, and I looked at the telegram and I said, okay, I got it, I will send it Motzei Shabbos. To me it was self-evident what I'm going to do. He says to me, no, I want you to send it now. So I said, listen, you did what you had to do, now you give me the telegram, I'll do what I have to do. He said to me, he realized I'm trying to be not listening to his order. He said, if you're not going to send it right now, as I'm ordering you, I'll have you court-martialed. So I told him, listen, You do what you have to do, and I'll do what I have to do. Bottom line, I sent the telegram on Motzei Shabbos, as I said I will. The next day, there's a commotion in the base, and they called my commanding officer that they'll take me for a court-martial. Okay, I had no idea what to anticipate, because I had no experience. And a day or two later, they marched me into a court-martial. And one of the first questions they ask, as you approach to the officer, and he says to me, "Would you like to be judged by this court, or would you like to go to the higher court?" Which means the higher court in the army. Implications are that I will be, if I'm found guilty, I'll probably get a much higher punishment. And it's like the Rebbe Shalom came and gave me an idea, and because I had no idea what I'm going to say. I said, I'd like to be judged by the court-martial by the highest ranking officer in the army, in other words, the highest court. And I'd like to invite Harav Goren, who was then the chief military in the army, and I'd like to invite him as a witness. This was the end of the story. After that, suddenly there's no court-martial, everything was quieted down, and since then I became the poisek in the base. Are you allowed to do this on Shabbos? You're not allowed to do this on Shabbos. I became the poisek. So that's the end of the story.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to give you a little flavor of the questions that we're dealing with are real life situations. So let's begin with the following important principle. In the Beis Halevi in Parshas Shemos, he brings the Gemara. Technically, and this is not practiced nowadays, if somebody's married for 10 years and does not have children, technically, according to the Gemara, we force the husband to divorce the woman. However, we don't do it outside of the land of Israel. Why? Because maybe it's not that they're infertile, it's that because of the sin of living outside of Eretz Yisrael, that is the contributing factor to why they don't have children. Okay, so that's the halacha. In Eretz Yisrael, we would force the couple to get divorced, and we don't do that bisman hazeh anyway. But according to the baseline halacha, in Israel we would force them to get divorced. In Chutz La'aretz we don't force them, because maybe avoin Chutz La'aretz garam. Frekta hafla. An amazing question. What do you mean we wouldn't force them in Eretz Yisrael to get divorced? Because maybe it's the sin of living outside of Eretz Yisrael. But Tosfos writes, the Shita of Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen, the end of Ksubas, that bisman hazeh there's no obligation to go to Eretz Yisrael because it's very difficult to live there. So what do you mean in Chutz La'aretz we won't force a couple to get divorced because we'll say it's the sin of not going to Eretz Yisrael, that's why they don't have children, but there's no longer a sin not to go to Eretz Yisrael. You're allowed to live in America. Nowadays you're allowed to go live in the 5 towns. Back in the day you couldn't because you had to go to Eretz Yisrael, but nowadays Tosfos says it's very hard to go to Eretz Yisrael. Says the Hafla, it's true it's very hard to go to Eretz Yisrael, but it's still a sin not to go to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, but it's very hard. But says the Hafla, but that's not why you're not going. The reason you're not going to Eretz Yisrael is not because it's hard. You're not going because you don't want to go. So it's still a sin not to go to Eretz Yisrael b'zman hazeh, even though you couldn't if you wanted to, because that's not the reason you're not going. So we see from here a very important principle, that in a situation where you're not able to do something, but even if you were able to do it, you wouldn't do it anyway, there's no oines. So therefore, the Beis Halevi continues. From here it comes out that someone who is not a Shomer Torah mitzvahs and an oinus happens, and somebody says to him, eat the cheeseburger, otherwise I'm going to shoot you. And he eats the cheeseburger, he's going to be punished for eating the cheeseburger. Why? Because he would have done it anyway. That you cannot utilize the taina of oinus if you would have done it even if it wouldn't have been an oinus. That's the premise of the chidush of the Beis Halevi. So, let's start as follows. If I'm a soldier in the army and I'm supposed to serve on Shabbos, and I could change my post with a Mechalel Shabbos with someone who's not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, is it lifnei iver to cause him to be Mechalel Shabbos for me? Do we call that lifnei iver lo sitei mechshel? What would we say? Everybody knows the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that it's only lifnei iver lo sitei mechshel if the person would not have done it without me. But if they would have done it without me, it's not lifnei iver. Who remembers what the Gemara calls that? It's only lifnei iver when it's betrei ivri de nahara, two sides of the river. If it's two sides of the river, meaning, let's say a nazar says, pass the wine. So if you're on the same side of the river, he could have gotten it without you. It's not lifnei iver lo sitei mechshel to pass him the wine. If it's on the other side of the river, and he couldn't have gotten it without you, it is lifnei iver lo sitei mechshel. So, if I put this Mechalel Shabbos in my post, am I causing him to desecrate Shabbos? No, he would have desecrated Shabbos without me. So would you call that the same side of the river or two different sides of the river? It's the same side of the river. He would have desecrated Shabbos without me. Now here's a very important factor. This is not on the sheets even. What if by me putting him in my post, I'm causing him to desecrate Shabbos more? He would have done it without me, but I'm causing him to do it more. So in other words, I can't be the cause of him desecrating Shabbos. But in this situation, this soldier would have desecrated Shabbos anyway, but now that he's in my post, he's desecrating Shabbos more. The opinion of the Ritva is we do not say lifnei iver lo sitei mechshel if you're causing someone to do the Avera more, only if you're causing him to do the Avera. Based on this Ritva, Rav Herzog in Psakim Uksavim, Siman Nun Vav, says that if you're a soldier in the army or you're a doctor in the hospital and you want to switch posts with somebody, and switching posts means you're going to cause them to sin more, you're allowed to do it. Okay, so it would be permitted. It would be permitted. Likewise, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in Mesoros Moshe Chelek Daled, you're allowed to do it. Because you're not causing him to sin, you're just causing him to sin more. You're allowed to cause someone to sin more. You just can't be the cause of his sinning. But now we're talking about the patient, okay? If you're the patient, and you could choose one of two doctors. You could choose Dr. so-and-so from Cleveland, who's the Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Or you could choose Dr. so-and-so from Canton, who's not a Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Who should you choose? So, based on this idea, it is pikuach nefesh. It's pikuach nefesh. The patient's life is on the line. Now, for a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, is he allowed to save someone's life on Shabbos? Yeah, he could save someone's life on Shabbos. It's an oinus. He has, in other words, Shabbos is pushed away from the priority of Jewish life. The Mechalel Shabbos, though, the Beis Halevi says, perhaps would not be allowed to save this person's life. Why? Because he would desecrate Shabbos anyway, even if this person's life was not on the line. So, if you take a look on page 4, in the table of contents of Shalos Teshuvos, Tzitz Eliezer, which is a rather odd place for there to be a psak. Okay, this is very interesting. You see where my arrow is? This is in the Maftechos of Tzitz Eliezer Chelek Ches. He says, again, the rule of the Beis Halevi is that oinus is only a mitigating factor if I would have done the right thing without the oinus, so then I'm allowed to violate in a situation of oinus. But if I would have done the wrong thing, had there not been an oinus, I can't rely on oinus. So he writes, The Yeshnoi, if you take a look on the fourth line, Parak Yud Gimel, this is literally in the table of contents of the Tzitz Eliezer. The Yeshnoi mitzvah al roife Yerushalayim lehizdakek lecholim habamela b'Shabbos kodesh. It is a mitzvah for a God-fearing doctor whose sick patients come to him on Shabbos. He should treat the sick patients so that to prevent the sick patient from going to an irreligious doctor. Because if the irreligious doctor saves the life of that patient, the irreligious doctor has been mechalo Shabbos. He has no heter to save the life of the patient. You hear this? An irreligious doctor is not allowed to save a Jewish life on Shabbos. Why? Because he would have desecrated Shabbos even if someone's life wasn't on the line. So he's not given a heter to save someone's life.
You should let him die.
What?
You should let him die.
You want to know, if the irreligious doctor comes and asks a shaila, should he save the person's life? We say to him, why are you coming to us to ask a shaila now? You haven't ever asked a shaila in history, you know. In other words, if an irreligious doctor decides to ask a shaila,
his question really is, can a person ask a religious person to do it for you? Is that the either? Because now he has no heter.
There's a religious doctor there anyway.
Okay. First, let's deal with this question, okay? This question is, the religious doctor should not give over the sick patient to an irreligious doctor because the irreligious doctor is not allowed to save the life of this Jew on Shabbos. He has no heter to save the life because the whole heter is based on oines. But there's no heter oines for somebody who would have violated had it not been an oines. You want to know, can the patient seek out the help of an irreligious doctor when there's a religious doctor to save him? When there's no religious doctor? Yes, because if you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos to save a life, you definitely could desecrate Lifnei Iver Leisitei Milchshot to save a life. Okay, that's an important nakuda. If you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos to save a life, you definitely could violate Lifnei Iver Leisitei Milchshot to save a life. The question now first is on the religious doctor. He should not give up the opportunity. Why? Mitaima kedei limnoya al yedei kein shaharoife she'eno dati lo yechal as Shabbos v'dvarim she'enim tzrichim. In other words, another thing is, if the religious doctor should not give it over to the irreligious doctor will even do things that are not needed to save the person's life, and there's no permissibility to do that. The religious doctor will know he'll only violate what's needed to save a life, and he won't violate what's not needed to save a life. This, the Tzitz Eliezer says, is based on the lamdus of the Beis Halevi, that the heter of oines is only given if, had it not been for an oines, you would have followed the halacha. But had you violated the halacha, even if it wouldn't have been an oines, then we do not give you a heter of oines. By the way, Rav Shlomo Zalman paskins exactly the same way. Okay, this is very important. Rav Shlomo Zalman, it's brought in Shmir Shabbos Kelchasai, that a patient should sooner call a Shomer Shabbos doctor on Shabbos than a irreligious doctor. Because to call an irreligious doctor, he is making the doctor sin. Can you imagine? You have an irreligious doctor, he's saving a life. Rav Shlomo Zalman says, what do we call when an irreligious doctor saves a life on Shabbos? We call it an avera. Which avera? Chilo Shabbos. What do you mean Chilo Shabbos? You're allowed to desecrate Shabbos to save a life. That's only if you normally keep Shabbos. If you normally keep Shabbos, you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos to save a life. If you don't keep Shabbos, you're not allowed to save the life.
How do you know what we would have done if he hadn't called Shabbos? He didn't treat the patient. He could have been working in his garden. He did a dozen aveiros. He's only over one. So maybe forget. If you're preventing him call Shabbos, you really don't know what he would have done. Which is more of an aveira. Is that exposed?
Yeah, that's a good point. Rav Moshe writes in a tshuva exactly what you're saying, that you're going to say that by calling in the religious doctor, you're going to say the irreligious doctor would have been mechalo Shabbos anyway. No, if he would have been home, he would have been turning on the light, turning off the light, turning on the light, turning off the light. But if he's in the hospital, what does he have to do in the hospital already? He could just drink coffee there.
It's not really
you know?
Shabbos if he's treating the patient. Even though maybe
Right, for him it might be, but whatever he's doing in the hospital, you could make the argument that he would be desecrating Shabbos less. But let's start with this argument first. The argument of Tzitz Eliezer and Rabbi Zalman Auerbach is that the heter of Oines Rachmana Patre, is only given in a situation where, had it not been for the Oines, you would have done the right thing. If you would have done the wrong thing, you have no heter of Oines, which comes out something very unusual. I think it would come out something very unusual. That you could have somebody saving a Jewish life on Shabbos, and it's not permitted. It's only, can you imagine? Who's allowed to desecrate Shabbos? If you keep Shabbos. If you don't keep Shabbos, you're not allowed to desecrate Shabbos. Why? Because if I keep Shabbos, now I have an oinus. If I desecrate Shabbos, it's not an oinus because I would have done it anyway. So the first point that Rav Sternbuch brings up, take a look on page 8. Yeah? Take a look on page 8. Rav Sternbuch in Shuvas V'Hanhagos and Rebbe Yashiv, as well as Reb Shmuel Eliezer Stern, say, wait a second. Why are you allowed to save a life on Shabbos? What's the heter of saving a life? Is the heter oines? The heter is not oines. That's not why you're allowed to save a life. The reason you're allowed to save a life on Shabbos is because of a chai bohem. That Jewish life has primacy, is even more important than Shabbos. The heter is not oines. If the heter would be oines, then we could say the Jew has a heter of oines, and the Machal Shabbos doesn't have the heter. The heter to save Jewish life on Shabbos is the pasuk v'chai bohem, that Jewish life is more important than observing Shabbos. So when a secular doctor saves a life on Shabbos, is he saving a life? He's saving a life. So then he's allowed to do it. Now, says Rav Sternbuch, since when do we say it's only a mitzvah to save a life if you're mechavein to be mekayem the mitzvah to save a life? And it might be actually dependent on what we learned this morning. Rav Sternbuch says, look, this secular doctor, he's saving a Jewish life. And says Rav Sternbuch, even though he's not mechavein to be mekayem the mitzvah to save a life, is he mechavein to save a life? Of course his kavanah is to save a life. Why else is he doing it? He's not, even a secular doctor, he's not only doing it for the paycheck. I mean, it's safe to assume he's doing it to help somebody. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to save the life. That's why he's doing it. He might not know where in the Chumash it says the mitzvah to save a Jewish life, but his kavanah is to be mekayim a mitzvah. Therefore, if the heter to desecrate Shabbos is not oines, it's the mitzvah of the chai bohem, and that is to save a Jewish life, it doesn't matter if he would have desecrated Shabbos anyway. He's doing the mitzvah. His kavanah is to save somebody. He would be allowed to do it on Shabbos. So Rav Sternbuch disagrees with the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Zalman Auerbach, and logically, it seems like it's somewhat of a mistake even to think that because Oinus Rachmana Patre does not apply to somebody who's Machal Shabbos, that he wouldn't be able to save a life. The heter is not Oinus. This is what Rabbi Levitan mentioned before. The heter is not Oinus. The heter is V'chai bohem. V'chai bohem applies to a Jew, Shomer Shabbos or not Shomer Shabbos. But here's another Nakuda that Rav Shlomo Zalman brings up, which also is very challenging. Are you allowed to hit an adult child? The Gemara in Kedushin talks about, are you allowed to hit an adult child? No. Why? Hit an adult child. He's going to hit you back. Lifnei iver. So Tosfos asks, so just be moichel him. Could you hit an adult child and have in mind that if he hits me back, I'm moichel? Tosfos says no. Why? Because he doesn't know you're moichel him. So what? But he didn't do an avera because you're moichel him. Yeah, but if in his mind he's doing an avera, it's mechavein lecho besar chazir v'achal basar tzli. He had kavanah to do an avera. Turned out he didn't do an avera. So what did you cause him to do? What did you cause him to do? You didn't cause him to sin. You caused him to sin b'machshava. You caused him to sin in thinking he was doing an Avera. Tosfos is Mechadesh. There's Lifnei Iver. You're now to cause somebody to think they're doing an Avera. Okay? That's Tosfos and Kedushin. You got what Tosfos says? Tosfos says that you can't hit an adult child, even if you're Meichel them, because if they don't know you're Meichel them, they're going to think they're doing an Avera, and they didn't do an Avera. You caused them to do something that they thought was an Avera. Says Rav Shomer Zalman, if you're a Jewish patient, you can't go to a secular doctor on Shabbos. Why? Because a secular doctor doesn't know that there's a heter of a chai b'hem. So you're causing the secular doctor to sin b'machshava. He thinks he's desecrating Shabbos. Now he doesn't care that he's desecrating Shabbos, but he thinks he's desecrating Shabbos. Turns out he's allowed to. So you're causing him to sin b'machshava. Okay? Based on Tosfos and Kedushin, Rav Shomer Zalman says you are not allowed to go to a secular doctor on Shabbos. Because even though he's allowed to treat you, but he doesn't know that he's allowed to treat you, that v'chai b'hem supersedes Jewish life. So you're causing him to sin b'machshava. Okay? That's the chiddush of Rav Shomer Zalman. Rav Shomer Zalman, Rav Sternbuch says no. There's no comparison at all to the case of hitting an adult child and causing him to sin b'machshava and treating a Jewish patient on Shabbos. What we call in yeshiva, you could drive a truck between the difference. The chiluk is so vast, there's no comparison at all. Why? In the case where you hit an adult child and the child hits you back, if you ask the child, what do you think you're doing? I think I'm doing an Avera. What is he doing? He's not doing an Avera. So you're causing him to sin b'machshava. But in the case of a secular doctor, if you ask the doctor, what am I doing? Doctor said, I'm being Mechal Shabbos. It turns out, is he being Mechal Shabbos? No, he's allowed to. So it turns out he's doing a mitzvah. When are you now to be goyrem somebody to sin b'machshava? That's if in reality what they're doing is only a dvar reshus, a discretionary activity. But if in reality what they're doing is a dvar mitzvah because they're saving a life, you are allowed to cause somebody to sin in thought. You're only allowed to cause someone to sin in thought if it turns out what they're doing is a dvar reshus. But if it turns out what they're doing is a dvar mitzvah, you're allowed to. So we have a very interesting machlokes, halacha l'maisa, whether you're allowed to use a secular doctor to treat a person on Shabbos. What about the following factor? The following factor is, and Rav Sternbuch says, well, maybe you could flip it the other way. What will this Jewish doctor be doing otherwise? Let's say he would not be saving the life of this patient. What would he be doing otherwise? He'd be at the Shabbos Suda. He'd be mekayim the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. What about the secular doctor? What would he be doing on Shabbos otherwise? He would be doing whatever he'd be doing. He possibly would be Mechal Shabbos. So Rav Shomer says maybe you can make the case it's better to use a secular doctor because you're not disturbing his Einik Shabbos. Because you're not being mevatel him from Einik Shabbos because he wouldn't be involved in Einik Shabbos. I guess it depends what he'd be doing. If he'd be playing golf, maybe he would be involved in Einik Shabbos. So in other words, when it comes to using the observant doctor, you're disturbing their Einik Shabbos. When it comes to using the secular doctor, you're not disturbing their Einik Shabbos.
Saving their life, that's part of Einik Shabbos.
No, it's not Einik Shabbos. It's an important thing to do. It's a noble thing to do, but you're not taking him away from Einik Shabbos. What about another inyan? Besides the lav of desecrating Shabbos, there's a mitzvah saseh of Shabbos. What's the mitzvah saseh of Shabbos? There's a mitzvah of shvisa. Okay, there's a mitzvah of shvisa. You have to rest on Shabbos. It says Rav Sternbuch, to use an observant doctor on Shabbos, maybe you can't ask them because even though they have a heter, you're also disturbing, you're ruining their asay of Shvisa Shabbos. But the secular doctor, he's already on his own lost Shvisa on Shabbos. He's already violated and lost out Shvisa Shabbos from the very onset of Shabbos. He didn't keep Shabbos from the beginning. So maybe it's preferable to ask the secular doctor, because you're not taking away Shvisa Shabbos, you're only taking away, you're causing him to violate. But Shvisa, he was Mavatal anyway. What?
It's not according to the law, the holiest gives you the actual positive as well.
Okay.
Meaning the case of Eretz Yisrael, where had we said that you have to give a get, but he doesn't need to because he's an holiest.
Right.
It doesn't give you the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't give you that schos. According to the law, he would have had it in holiest. Right?
Okay.
So here as well, if it would be an holiest, you would get the mitzvah of Shisa too. If that's the story.
Nobody says that oinus is command of Adami. Nobody's going to argue that oinus is like you did it. No, oinus is not going to give you the zchus of as if you're there, as if you did it.
That's what Paul is saying, though, because he says that if you wouldn't go anyway, then you don't have that time there.
No, if you wouldn't go anyway, you're going to be held accountable for violating, right? In other words, it's considered chilul, but nobody's going to say it gives you the positive merit as if you did. Nobody's going to say it's like you did do this chus.
And why would you have to get worse then?
Because you are considered sinning by not going to Eretz Yisrael.
It's not the schus of Eretz Yisrael.
It's not the zchus, it's the avera of living outside of. Okay. Bottom line is, even though the Tzitz Eliezer originally wrote that it's preferable for a show. So again, the Tzitz Eliezer says if somebody comes to a Shomer Shabbos doctor, he should see them right away. If somebody, and according to the Tzitz Eliezer, you don't want him to go to the secular doctor because he has no heter of Einus Rachmana Patre. The Tzitz Eliezer ultimately says that it's a little bit questionable that why didn't any of the poskim ever bring this svara of the Beis Halevi, that the heter of oinus could only be utilized by somebody who otherwise would have done the right thing. It's not codified by any of the poskim. So Tzitz Eliezer says, bottom line, yes, it's preferable to use a Shomer Shabbos doctor, but if you have the opportunity to use any doctor, you don't delay. You don't start asking, well, maybe he has no heter oinus. Again, because if the chai bohem is strong enough to push off a lav and to push off Shabbos, it definitely is strong enough to push off lifnei iver lo sitei milchshal.
I grew up in Williamsburg. There were two doctors. One was a Shomer mitzvahs, one was a Shomer Shabbos. Everybody was mocked to go to the Shomer Shabbos all the time.
Yeah, look, the Shulchan Aruch says that when it comes to Chil Shabbos, it's preferable for when there is an issue of Chil Shabbos to be conducted through Shomer Torah mitzvahs. Now, regarding if you're a doctor switching your post, or you're a soldier in the army, and you want to give over your job to a Mechal Shabbos, okay? So back to the hospital case. Is it a violation of Lifnei Iver L'Sita Milchshal to give over your job, your position, your post on Shabbos to someone who ordinarily would desecrate Shabbos? Says Rav Moshe Feinstein in Mesaras Moshe, there's no problem. You're allowed to do it. It's better not to do it directly. In other words, it's better not to call up a guy and say, hey, Jake, you don't want to do me a favor? I'm a Shomer Shabbos. I'm going to give you my job. You come in on Shabbos for me. It's better not to do it to him, to give it over to him directly. But it's better to go to the supervisor, tell the supervisor, look, I'm Sharon Tar Mitzvahs. I'd rather not work this way, even though you know the supervisor is going to give it over to the other guy who's a Yid. You're allowed to wiggle out that way. What about in the army? Same thing. However, Rav Herzog wrote a tshuva that you shouldn't do it. That if you're a Shomer Shabbos doctor or Shomer Shabbos soldier, and if you know by wiggling out it's going to go to another Yid who's not Shomer Torah mitzvahs, it doesn't set a good precedent. Basically, what are you saying? What's the message you're giving? You're giving over the message, there are two kinds of Jews. Some Jews keep Shabbos. Some Jews don't keep Shabbos. I'm the kind of Jew that keeps Shabbos. So I'm going to wiggle out, and I'm going to give it over to this other type of Jew, because this other kind of Jew, he doesn't have to keep Shabbos. Are you allowed to do it? It's mutter. As a private citizen, is it a good thing to do? Of course, you have to do whatever it takes. But it shouldn't be done. It's better to do the job yourself and avoid sending this message of that there are different kinds of Yidden.
A military guy comes on Friday night and he wants wine for Kiddush, and he asks the neighbor, do you have wine for Kiddush? Are you allowed to give him wine because he's a Nesach and make up a Nesach, you're Machon with Nesach from Shabbos?
Yeah.
He said, no, based on some sort of, because if he says Yom HaShishi, the issue is not that there's an Avayah, it's not Nesach. You don't believe in Hashem. If you say Yom HaShishi, you believe in Hashem, you're not Matzah.
So he,
Interesting. From Chosher, it takes
for him. But you can't drink it yourself. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you start the next topic. These subjects are just, springboard for further limudim, and we're going to start the next topic now. The next topic is a very profound subject. It has many ramifications. We all know that the Chai Bahem supersedes even Shabbos. You're allowed to be Mechala Shabbos to save a life. What about, are you allowed to be Mechala Shabbos maybe to save a life? Suffix to save a life. Yeah, we know Mefakchenes Alav Sagal, you're allowed to uncover a pile of rubble to maybe save a life. What about to maybe save a life in the future? Okay, what we're going to talk about now is, at what point in time do we say that the possibility of saving a life is too remote to be Mechala Shabbos? Okay, so what is the definition of Pikuach Nefashos? And it has many ramifications, specifically when it comes, let's say, to the hostages. Because are you allowed to, let's say, save a Jewish hostage by trading in 100 terrorists? Now, what are these terrorists going to do? When you release a terrorist, they're going to go home and start learning Shari Tshuva, and they're going to repent, and you know what they're up to. In all likelihood, it's going to spell disaster. But not today, maybe in a month. Do you have to worry about that? In other words, what is the definition of Jewish life? Is it Jewish life today? Is it in 3 days? Is it in a week? Is it in a year? Do you need to worry about the future? Does future life have any ramification, halacha l'maisa? Okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.